Hi everyone. Hello, thanks for joining us this evening. My name's Colette, as some of you might already know, and I'm the Artist Development Coordinator / Curator here at Primary in Nottingham. Just to say, we might have a few people kind of joining us later on, but I'll kickstart with the intro before we hand over to Roo and Sahjan. So again, thank you for joining us for a new vocabulary for collaboration with artists Roo, Dhissou and Sahjan Kooner, who I'll hand over to shortly. They'll both be presenting to the audience before we start a conversation, and it'd be great if you wanted to join in, ask questions, feed in thoughts, share opinions, etc. We're going to be going on tonight until about 7:30. Help yourself to refreshments at any time. I'm going to go on to housekeeping as well shortly for anyone who's not familiar with the building. But just a really quick thank you to Jim and Tom, who are assisting tonight, technical support. And just to say that this event is being delivered by Primary as part of the Kaleidoscope Network, with partners Eastside Projects, Spike Island and the Newbridge Project. So with regards to housekeeping, these points are mainly for people who are here in the building. So this is a hybrid event, so we've got some people joining us with Primary, and we've got some of us who are online this evening. So for anyone in the building, toilets can be found just through this door to my left and to the right. We're not expecting any fire alarms this evening, so if a fire alarm does sound, please exit the building through the front door where you entered. When we begin the discussion portion of the event, please raise your hand and wait for me to bring the microphone towards you. It won't kind of amplify your voice within the room, but it's so that anyone who's joining us online can hear you speak. So for anyone attending online, closed captions are available for those who wish to use them. You'll see the option to open closed captions at the bottom of your Zoom window. This button should appear as 2 Cs. Here you can also find subtitle settings where you can adjust the size of captions. Please remain muted. This is to ensure a better audio experience for everyone throughout. If you have any questions or technical concerns during the event, please use the chat box. You can message me, the host, directly. And I'll be keeping an eye on the Zoom throughout this evening. When we begin the discussion portion of the event, please use the chat box again to type your questions out, and I can vocalise them so that Roo, Sahjan and the audience, both in person and online, can hear. Finally, a few points for everyone. I'm going to be sharing an audience survey following this event. If you can please take the time to complete it, your feedback is invaluable. I'm going to be sharing a link later this evening or tomorrow with you via email, and we've also got paper copies at the back there with the refreshments. Please be respectful of each other during the discussion. This event is being recorded, but it's just going to be where the cameras are directed. So anyone who's on Zoom will be able to see at the moment that we're directing cameras to myself, the screen, and the artist Roo and Sahjan. So we won't be capturing any faces of anyone on Zoom or in the audience. Obviously, your voice will be captured if you're here and part of the discussion. So that's the end of housekeeping. I'm delighted to welcome Sahjan and Roo, who will discuss family, the village, longing, black holes, collectives, futures, labour, tools, transformation and hope. While Sahjan embraces glitch in software and technology, Roo works with craft-based practices and hospitality. Both are generous practices. Sahjan's camaraderie of technology is met with Roo's embrace of collaborative, multiplicitous practice. The two work fluidly through the above topics. Join them to explore a new vocabulary for collaboration. In 2021 to 2022, Roo and Sahjan collaborated on Nangal Pend-ing and /DarkVillage.stl, a book published by Primary and compiled by the artists. The publication consists of short texts and conversations between Roo, Sahjan, me, and independent curator Aisling Ward. The texts handle all things collaborative, curatorial, and community. The publication can be purchased at the event this evening, so just come to me at the end of the talk. And also online, I'll share the link with everyone, either via the Zoom or via email at the end of the conversation. Without further ado, I will hand over to Roo and Sahjan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Colette.
So I'm Roo Dhissou. I'm an artist and a researcher. I'm currently doing a full-time practice-based PhD. It sounds really academic and studious and posh. It's really not. I'm just essentially being paid for 3 years to make art. Don't tell the funders that. Yeah, my practice is all things to do with collaboration, community, and craft. And I have both an inner and outer practice, which I'll explore with you today on my website.
Hi everyone, I'm Sahjan. I'm an artist, predominantly working in new media and computer-based technologies. I'm kind of interested in exploring relationships between biology, technology, kind of like terraforming and like world-making exercises. So I have this kind of like expansive idea of like how we can work with materials. And a big part of that will actually be thinking through, when I present and thinking through with you as well, Roo, how we actually can work together to actually make a world which could be hospitable for precarious life, I call it. But yeah, it's a really interesting opportunity for me to like kind of like create a dialogue like this and then work with you. So yeah, I'm really excited to share that with everyone.
So like Colette said, we're both going to spend like a few minutes going through our websites and talking about various works. And then after that, we're going to have a collaborative conversation about how we work together to share that with you all. So feel free to pitch in any kind of like suggestions you have about collaboration or just kind of like opening up that dialogue back into the room. Yeah. I'm going to go now. So I'm just going to fiddle with this speaker. Sorry for the sound. So I have two types of practice, and I call them the inner practice and the outer practice. I'm going to start with the inner practice. So my inner practice basically consists of a lot of craft making, where I'm like independently making. So whether that's like weaving the kind of like bed type structures, working with sculpture, or like kind of like broom binding and various different types of mediums. I'm always thinking about like our relationship to materials, to the land we're from, the land we kind of grew up in. So for me, I grew up in Punjab. So thinking about like things like the munji over here, which is synonymous to Punjabi culture, Pakistani culture as well. And then kind of using these material objects to activate them within community spaces. So not only making art objects, but allowing them to have a life of their own within a kind of communal space, whether that's public, outdoors, or back in the institution, like thinking about how that object takes on like a life of its own and how it kind of like works to think about systems outside of the institution. And then I also have, as part of my inner practice, thinking about things like spirituality and like religion. So over here we've got like a cage type thing, which is this work's called Religious Cargo. And within the cage there are various different religious objects and religious ephemera, some handmade and some kind of like collected and gifted. But this was riffing on something that my mom used to have in her house. So she had this one prayer shelf, and it had like a life of pi situation going on with like one of every god. So she had like Mary with her arms out, all the 10 Sikh gurus, various different Hindu gods. And then equally she had like the Quran and like various different other religions. She was hedging her bets like hard. And I just love that for her. Yeah, it just started to make me think like in the West we have such a way of like categorizing cultures and communities and thinking of how to like put people in boxes, like this person is Asian, Indian, and I know that comes from like a big stipulation around like funding, but equally like in medicine, like what culture are you? How do we categorize you? So thinking about non-binary structures within culture, essentially. And so I just love that she was able to embrace so many different things, and that's where that multiplicity comes from. Like who owns what really? What comes from where, everything you can trace back to a certain origin. So without like homogenizing or blurring those boundaries, I'm thinking about like similarity, opposition, and difference. So allowing there to be like cultural complexity and nuance, but also thinking about what happens when you bring all of those ephemera together and what kinds of conversations that creates. These are some of the munjis that I have in practice. So they each say Aram, Seva, and Sangat. Aram is to rest, Seva is selfless service, and Sangat is community. And these have arguably become like the 3 threads in my practice. So first and foremost, Aram, make sure you're taking rest, people. Like in this kind of like space where we're constantly making, constantly producing, constantly showing work, having to find survival, thinking of DIY culture, being resourceful. How do we find space to rest, and how do we allow our like fellow comrades to rest as well? And then Sangat is like really important to me. That's my community. And community for me can take shape in so many different forms. It can be my artist community, my friendship community, my religious community, the people that live down my road. Like, how am I serving my community? And if I don't take rest, then how can I serve my community? And then finally, Seva, which is selfless service. And that is kind of like thinking about principles of hospitality. So like really simple acts, like in Sikh culture, in Sikhi, we often like gift things. So it's like through langar, which is the Sikh practice of serving food for free to anyone in the public. Thinking about that constant like resource and sustainability of food growing, food sharing. So it can be like really simple acts, like, I don't know, like growing some crops and then sharing them out with like people on your road. Or like, I don't know, going out into the community and like sharing food with people. And that's what the practice of Seva looks like. So thinking about how I embed that within my own practice, that's something I'm really interested in. So a lot of the time I think about how I can facilitate conversations, how I can go out into the public and do things like give out cups of tea and stuff. So this kind of nicely takes me on to my outer practice. So in my outer practice, you can see there are a lot more people involved and a lot less galleries, because this work exists in the public for the public. So I like think about public art a lot. Like I really hate like giant monolithic sculptures that take up so much space in the public and probably aren't even for half of the community that grew up there. That's just my own opinion. But yeah, so I'm constantly thinking about like how we take up spaces in different communities and how we give to those communities. So in the top right-hand corner up there, right, yeah, that performance is called Jawali, and it was riffing on the street vendors in India who go around selling tea. So although I'm not interested in like street vendors or anything like that, I was thinking a lot about like David Hammond's, who knows the work with the snowballs? Anyone? No? Have a look, really great artist. And he was like selling snowballs on a New York City, and it was kind of like this idea of like selling something pointless. But then I want to kind of like spin that around and think about what it means to actually give something that someone can value and enjoy. So like a cup of tea on a cold morning. So I went around like the city in Birmingham shouting, Jai Bilo, and had like people come over to me, and there was nothing expected in return. It was just a case of, here's a cup of tea. What does it mean to just be generous and give someone a cup of tea? Like a really simple act. But it wasn't the performance or the kind of like element of being there in the city and taking up space that was important in the end of the artwork. It was the conversations and the discourse that kind of like act generated. So through that conversations with like people in the public, we talked about things like Bengal famine. We spoke about like where tea comes from, how tea travels by sea or by land and what that means. We talked about homelessness in the city and why there isn't more like access to food and drink and the kind of like the food banks and stuff that were existing. So really powerful conversations just over a cup of tea. Everything's fixed with a cup of tea. No, I'm joking. And then like when like lockdown was going on and stuff, because a lot of my work relies on like being in public and being in community, I felt like a real loss of community. So I took to YouTube and created a YouTube channel and just sharing like recipes from like my family. So this video is like how to make aloo wale paratha. It was really interesting because like although I was thinking about like how to share this with the public, like I was staring at a screen and I didn't really feel that connection. Like there was such a lack of connection with the audience. I didn't get to have that moment where I could see their face or try the food with them. So that was kind of sad, but it was fun to do a YouTube channel, and I did my best Nigella Lawson impressions too. And then I'll just take you through one final work and then pass over to Sahjan. So this is more recent work where I took like the mungies to go and be activated in space. So I went to Soho Road, which is like basically like a mini migrant area in Handsworth. So I grew up in Handsworth. It's a really kind of special place to me. And I just wanted to know what it would be like to kind of like go back with my artwork and what people would think of me there. So like at the same time I was kind of a bit nervous because I thought like I'm an artist now, I have privilege, like I'm just gonna like be bombarding into this community, like do I even have the authority to do that? So I kind of tentatively went round with this mungie, and then this guy over here was like, do you want a hand with that? And was like really generous and helped me carry it. And then I kind of stopped at this one place over here for lunch just to grab a cup of tea. And then when they, because they're also Punjabi, when they saw the mungies, they got so happy, which just made like my heart feel really full, because it felt like that community was being responsive and saw this work being made. And then this was like, this guy who sat here with me, he was like, I'm going to call my wife, I'm going to call my sister, I'm going to call my sons. We want you to make 5 of these by next week. I'm going to have like, so in Handsworth, they have something called a Mela, which is like a big kind of festival. And he was like, I need 10 by Friday for the Mela, which was like, whoa, uncle, calm down. But it was really nice to see like this instant recognition, like, oh, wow, this is a mungie. I have not seen one of these in 6 years. This is village life, and go on.
Are these the ones that were like rest and community?
Yeah, exactly. So this one says Seva, and then that one says rest there, and then the green one is community. But like thinking about, like it's fine to say that they can be in a gallery space, but then it becomes like a real neoliberal concept. Because like when these were showing in ArtCore, we had to like push people to be like, you can sit on it, you know, and they were like, you can sit on art. And it's like, we've all been trained in the West to be like so resistant with art objects. So I really like people to kind of like touch and engage with my stuff. And that's where that kind of hospitality and the generosity comes in through my practice. But yeah, we're going to talk a bit more about collaboration in a bit, but I'm going to pass over to Sahjan now. So thanks.
Also, Soho Road,
Yeah.
The legend place.
Oh no, it's amazing.
How many examples on Soho Road?
Yeah, there are about like 3 or 4 Gabora. Yeah. I just love like, I don't want to kind of like make it into a utopia, but people really like get each other because the struggle's like united over there.
And
but like,
the intersection of so much communities, because you know my family grew up in Handsworth and Aston, and you know Soho Road also big Caribbean community.
Massive. Yeah.
It's like this really good like intersection of different cultures, and kind of
Exactly.
having this place that holds. Having this place that holds all of that. I find there's no other road like it in Birmingham.
No, it's true. Yeah.
And it runs all the way through as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right from Hockley all the way down to like near to West Brom.
Yeah.
It's like that consistently, and it just shows like, and it's really annoying for me. Like I see that how underfunded like communities like that are, and it's just frustrating because like you know they have this like real DIY culture where they all band together, and you really see like people like just helping one another and understanding that struggle. Like not to like glorify it, but it is pretty great.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for that.
No worries.
Cool. Hi everyone. That was really amazing, by the way. Thank you. Oh no, I'm going to sit down. I'm very lazy. My legs hurt. But no, thank you for that. It's good to see. Like, it's nice to just like see you again, like all the way back. Hi, welcome to my world. I'm like a bit of a geek, and I'm going to be quite like semi-neurotic because I'll be like, I speak really quickly and things will just collapse in on themselves. So if you can follow, that'll be amazing. If you can't, that's fine as well, like because I know what I'm like. But this is kind of the portal to my website, and I talk about it quite a lot. There's a lot of similarities with me and Roo's practices, but people don't really see them on the face value because they think they're so distinct. But the key thing that interests me in my work right now is this idea of like, kind of like portals or entryways into other worlds as ways to imagine and speculate on potentialities for our existence. This is, it's just launched on Netflix, the new Resident Evil series, and I'm watching it right now and I really like it. But this is the portal to the Hive in Raccoon City, and I'm a big geek, and I don't mind if people don't follow this, but like, in Raccoon City, they were testing a T virus, which basically was a virus which kind of escaped the lab, and I don't want this to sound like what it's going to sound like, but it escaped the lab and became like took over a whole city, which is Raccoon City, and the whole of the Resident Evil, which is a pop culture video game thing and a film series and now a television series, follows this event which took place in Raccoon City. And I think in systems, so this is kind of where it originated from. So this is the doorway into my world. And then I'm going to quickly talk about a few works because I'm cautious of time. Could you just tell me when it's like, I think it's 24.
35, so you go about, we'll do it to 40.
Yeah, 40, yeah. I'm going to quickly just talk about some works and how I think about like materials and like the body and kind of things I'm interested in. This is a work I made for the duo show out of a residency I did with Roo, and it's called Hyperphage, and a phage is kind of like a synthetic collaboration. Well, not necessarily synthetic, it's actually kind of like both natural. It's a combination between two things, sometimes a bacteria and a virus. And this basically is, the closer you get, you'll realize what it is. It's two images of me. One is dressed as a cowboy when I was a kid, and me and recently as an astronaut, because I'm like really interested in going to space, and I'm trying to get NASA to like take me there, and hopefully they will one day. But I was like, when I was a kid, I dressed up as a cowboy, and because I was kind of, my mom dressed me up, and then we shot a video when we were going to the moon together recently with my mom, which is really intense and funny. But what's growing over them is basically an agar solution with 4 different funguses, which are kind of local to where I live. And yeah, like it's just I don't like talking about what it is. I'm quite interested in like figuring out what you could speculate what it is, but it's just one of these forms which kind of exists in my practice, which, yeah, it's kind of like just the thing which grows, and I'm really interested in like primordial soups of life. And what's interesting when you put this in a gallery context is like this thing is going to keep on growing, and it kind of alarms institutions of like, how do we look after this thing that keep on growing, and it's going to like emerge and fruit one day. It's, yeah, it's just like a really cool piece of work, and I think it's part of a vocabulary of things I'm developing, which kind of look at these kind of distinct conditions of transformation, colonization, and like altering like a physical form in the world. And I just want to go to space, literally. That's literally my thing. But yeah, you can see what's kind of happening with it, like the progressively. And one of the things which is really interesting in this work actually is like I worked with a mycologist who's also a zoologist to grow the fungi. He's also collaborating with me on newer works as well. So the thing which is quite common in my work is I start off with these like problems which I'm interested in, or like situations, and I start like draw people into them. Like it's kind of like a melodrama of like science. It's like, oh, I really want to become like a fungus. How do I do that? And then like someone will get involved, and like all these things will start collapsing on each other. And they're like, yeah, it's like a really funny there's like really funny email threads in my like folders, by the way, where I'm just talking to random people about like, why wouldn't this fungus grow on me? But yeah, it's like I just tend to be like this is the neurotic in me, which is fine because I'm like a Capricorn rising, which I totally understand. Yeah, this is like aggressively minimal, which I'm really happy about as a piece of work. It's just called Vents, and it's got like a winky smiley face emoji next to it, which is kind of a piss. Sorry, I can say that. Yeah, I can say that. It's like a piss take on like minimalism a bit, but it really isn't. It's kind of like a generosity thing at the same time because. So when I was when me and Roo were working on this project called Astral Village Slow, which showed at River Lights in Derby. We were really interested in the village in India, and our village is about like 2.5 hours drive from each other. Yeah. India's like like we can put like I don't know 30, 40 Englands in there, you know. But what's really beautiful about it is the proximity, which we didn't even know about, and then we were investigating the connections between that location. This was a kind of a way for me to like think about a portal, and you can see quite from the last image to this image is the use of chroma key green, which is I use as a way to like speculate. And chroma key green is this thing which, if anyone watches Marvel films or like any kind of like anything really, even like if you watch like on YouTube now, chroma key green basically is like the backdrop used to post-produce a background, so you edit out things. So you can put it, if it was behind me right now, I could be floating in space, talking. And it's just this idea, it's like a really magical material substance. And I used it as a way to speculate and interject this idea of like, my mom, when she was talking about like migration, when she left India in the late 60s, early 70s. And she was like, oh, we thought that England would be this potential space. It could be anything for us. And then I kept on thinking about these other potential spaces in the world which exist around us at all times. And Marvel does it really well, but they have like $100 million, maybe like $1 billion budget. And so I went quite lo-fi and just was like, here's a chroma key green wall, and like here's a vent which has these has these reed diffuser sticks in them, and they're kind of suffused with lemongrass. So when whoever went to see the exhibition could notice this. Like when you went up close to it, you could just smell lemongrass, which is one of the first smells you get near my village because we grow lemongrass quite close to us. And it's this thing which we do, like we pour oil at the front of a house when someone comes, and it just smells for the whole day, which is one of the reasons why it was it's like this kind of like funny aggression with minimalism. And it just sits there, and they were like ambiently within the space, quite a few of them, and it's something which now is making me lead to like thinking about the way that I could like expand and create whole venting systems which exist with a different sense, which is something I'm working on right now with a perfumer. Again, like other people will just collapse into my world really quickly. What else will I talk about? Maybe this one's quite cool. I'm like lo-fi, not professional right now. I'm just like, oh yeah, this looks cool. This was a work I did, and this is based on my bedroom in India. And again, it's kind of like austerely like minimal and aggressive in its minimalism. But it's basically composed of these like metal stud walling structures, which are used in all forms of contemporary architecture. And so they're kind of the skeleton of a building. And I was like kind of in my head going, oh, what would it be like if I could bring my bedroom over here? And it's really funky because the space was huge, wasn't it? Massive. It was massive. And then you put this like bedroom I lived in India, and you bore into this space, and it's like this tiny little nook. And I was like, oh my God, how small is my life? But at the same time, it's really massive because in that bedroom, I got to just like imagine other worlds, and that's what a lot of people in my family did. We're like oral, we're kind of oral, I guess. Like we speak and think, but we don't necessarily write down things. So we talk through like problems and ideas and visions. And that bedroom was a place where I had a lot of visions in my life.
Can you share some of the video?
I don't think I can share because of the sound. Or maybe I will actually without sound. That'll be fine, I think. Yeah. I'll do that in a sec. And within this architectural cage or structure, bedroom, were these two television screens playing videos. One on this side was actually a video of my mom and me and my sister, my sister's partner, having a conversation about the moon because we were like planning to go to the moon together. You guys aren't laughing. Amp it up. So we dressed up as astronauts to go to the moon. I'll show you photos of that in a second. And then in this other one was actually the video of us going to the moon with like all this like complex glitching interjections of like data streams from YouTube about NASA's live stream, like accent neutralization technologies which people use to get rid of their accents to move countries, which is a big thing in India because you actually, kind of middle-class Indians want to get rid of their accents so they can settle in America and Canada and Britain. And there's a guy called Abhishek who's really funny. He lives in Mumbai, actually teaches you how to get rid of your accent, who is part of their video as well. And he teaches you how to like abandon your accent, which I thought was really like a weird proposition for you as a person. And within this also was like lemongrass was just pumping through vent systems, and this ambient smell of lemongrass was everywhere. So it's a very like sensuous space. I kind of work in a very sensuous way with materials, even though it kind of like looks quite like cool and distant. It's kind of like really seductive, I think, as a thing. I think I'll play a video in a second, but what I want to talk about is kind of similar to what Roo talked about. Is like I have this world which I make, which is kind of like comes out of like these really complex ideas and quite conceptually driven world. And then I have this other world where I engage with people quite a lot. And yeah, like I barter with people like cosmically. So I give people birth charts, and I develop birth charts for people. This is my birth chart for my practice, and I talk and guide people through like, not just people, individuals, but like groups as well. So I did one with the whole gallery before as well, and I sat them down and was like, your Gemini looks really funky. You should really calm down on the aggressive emails you send to each other, and you should like maybe be less passive aggressive to one another because your Aries is like this. But I do that quite collaboratively, and I try to figure out like tension points together because I use these things not as a I'm not like hugely into astrology. I am into astrology. Like I'm a person who believes in I'm a person who like uses it as a system to like gather things. I am, but like I'm just like that's who I am. I use it as a system to like gather things and structure things. So it's a really good way of like exploring things together with people. And I also I do that. Then I also do these things with like tarot cards where I read people's practices and what they have tension. So they bring me questions of they have with their practice, and I sort of guide them through structures. And that's what this really is about. It's not really about like future telling because I don't really do that. It's more about figuring out like structurally what's going on within their worlds. Yeah, it was really cool because we did this with, and you were present as well. We did this in a allotment with like friends, and like a lot of artists and curators came as well. And it was really funny because I was like, oh my God, you've got the wheel, and like the wheel means this, and like you should be thinking about these things within the world. And it kind of like really stretches how people are seeing themselves within their practice. And then, which is kind of like with the teller, I guess, the role which took in our village in India, the person who's like we had elders who would talk to us quite and guide us through things which were problems. Again, it's like a part of the oral tradition in our village. And then I have a bazaar is less like thing, but I think the way I sort of have been, maybe I'll play the video without sound because I don't want to like ruin everything. I'll just mute it. I think, yeah. Yeah, cool, thanks. It shouldn't do anything now. And I'll just talk over it for a bit and I'll skip some parts because it's really fun. Maybe I'll go to like here. Maybe like here and see what happens. Yeah, so throughout the video, like stuff is happening, which is like, it'll slow down. Yeah, so stuff is happening in the video where like the archive of my family, which is like a really big part of what we left India with. So my family we carried our photographic, oral, written archive over from India to England. And within this work, actually, the archive is the first thing which explodes open and starts rendering, and you can't hear it, but there's a really beautiful spectral sound to this. And then a digital voice comes over discussing the idea of like unpacking something to reveal some type of like world and some type of potentiality. And one of the big things I always talk about with collaboration, especially because I work with my family with this, is the idea of contamination. So their stories and their worlds are falling into mine, and it starts becoming this weird like primordial goo of a practice. And yeah, all these other things start overlaying and glitching into the world. And I've got 7 minutes left. Oh, cool. Maybe I'll go to like here. Yeah, there's like this flash mob thing, which if anyone knows me, I'm obsessed with flash mobs. My goal in life is just to run flash mobs, so like a flash mob industry, which will slowly like overtake all cities. Sorry? In space, yeah, like a flash mob with like gravity-defying instruments, you know. But there's like a lot of footage from our trip we took in 2002 and then I took in 2016. And then there's these digitally rendered structures like the moon which come in. So this work starts slowly like evolving and kind of like, yeah, like almost like a digital debris starts trying to like force itself into some type of structure, some type of framework or some type of rendering, which is how I kind of sometimes see how bodies are made. And that's just how I was thinking, especially a migrant body, which is a body which was especially like my mom and my body, was chronically assembled and disassembled by states and nation states and borders. So, because we migrated through 3 different countries, so I've always been interested in the fact that we move and we're mobile. And there's like Abhishek's here, and you can't hear what he's saying, but it's so intriguing the way he's talking about like actually the accent as a biological organ within you, and he's asking you to abandon that to actually speak in English, like speak in a neutral accent, to be able to be understood. And he tells you about ways that you can do that, strategies you can do that without so you can't be seen. And it's not like it's a rare thing. It's actually quite a common thing in India. That's what I was trying to say. It's like a common thing with middle class, kind of affluent, mobile, kind of like a potential diaspora, potential emigre who want to go to like the US, and it's just what actually this leads into is really interesting. You won't be able to hear it either, which is a real shame. But like, there's a conversation that took place between me and 3 students in America who were talking about how their accents are actually being registered by their Americans, and it's the first thing they notice is how they get treated differently by just having an accent, because they constantly told they can't be understood, constantly told to change their accent. And it was this really interesting thing, like, oh, the tools are being made to get rid of you, which I thought was kind of like really terrifying, but like an interesting way to collapse it into this world. Is this where, yeah, like maybe I'll just go forward.
Okay. 1 more minute.
Yeah. Oh yeah, this is an avatar I've made, which is of myself, which is slightly creepy. I like creepy things, it's just who I am. But it kind of like is made by these digitally rendered processes which capture the body. And I don't know if anybody plays video games, but like you do this in Metal Gear Solid, like they can capture the full head of you and full body, and they just use that as like they create like a skin of you, and then that's the thing which actually becomes like the character. So there's nothing internal to it. And throughout this video, you'll start seeing the interior of my body trying to be made. So this thing is what you can't hear, but the thing itself is discussing kind of the movement and the mobileness of a body in time and space as it tries to leave and flee or an exit. and it constantly changes. But I'll try and move forward a bit so we can just, so you get a wrap. I feel like this is kind of like, yeah, here maybe? Yeah, there's these, part of the video was also, it's a very dense video and I really like understand that, and it's kind of like full of different things. But there was this like planetoid structures which came into it, which are all based on the moon, because that was the big thing we wanted to do. Because we was thinking, oh, we migrated from India to here, and then now our next migration, as a species almost, is to space. And I thought the point of call would be like, oh, let's go to the moon for a moment. Because everyone was fleeing to the moon, like or space in general, like all these billionaires. And I was a bit like, oh, if they're all going, then maybe I can go. And the only way I could go was with these really cheap and lo-fi techniques, which you'll see in a second. Which, like, maybe I'll fast forward. Yeah, here we go. Maybe it's here. This is a problem with new media work. I even forget the points. Maybe I should be like, this is it. Yeah. So like we're dressing up as like astronauts, and we're like, yay, let's go! And we're having like a full-on fun. It was the best day of my life. Like making my mom and my sister and my sister's partner get dressed up as we contacted NASA, and we got like moon rocks from them and Martian rocks, which they sent over. So the Martian rock was from North Africa, and the moon rock was an actual sample of the moon rock. And the part of the video is us discussing that, and then we had these drones which were like capturing us, and it was like the most hilarious thing ever. Like, our neighbors were like, we saw them in the window watching us, and I was like, oh my god, they're gonna hate us forever. They're gonna be like, what's this whack family doing on this road? And you can kind of see them. They move the curtain. Like it was so funny. But the drones are like constantly capturing us because we were like, I was really interested in this idea of like how do you render the body, especially with the different types of technologies now. And we were just all like having fun and talking and just kind of gathering as a community of like because the four of us is what we really got left in our family, and we were talking and spent the day together and really had an incredible conversation about like exit, like as a strategy, like especially in a moment where like it seems like exit seems quite like dangerous, and because it is dangerous, that's the most interesting. And we were just like having a lot of fun. The thing I kind of want to stress is the fact that I kind of don't know how the conversation started with my family, but we both wanted to work with each other, like in a mutualistic way. Because my mom said something really interesting. She works in ASDA, and she was like, the interesting thing about we were talking about the labor, when we were recording ourselves, we were talking about the labor conditions involved, because I get to take them into this like fantasy world, like for a moment, you know, and yet they still fantasize in those spaces. And I was like, oh, it's quite beautiful. Like in both these worlds, we're still allowed some space of fantasy, because it's almost like strange how you like get criminalized for like imagining other worlds, particularly out of the structures of neoliberalism which have surrounded us, because they've stripped anything of like potentiality away from us. And then just sitting there with like the four of us just together having so much like fun. It kind of also on a personal level, it just made me really happy about my work, because I was like, oh, I can just like work with my like folks in a new way, and it just, because I really hate working by myself, like in the studio, and it might look like all my work is by myself, but Roo knows this, like I extensively have a huge network of people around me who make work with me, and yeah, it's just like I really wanted it to be really fun, and that's kind of why I make work, because I can have a bit of fun, and yeah.
So that's both of our practices.
Yeah, on time. I'm impressed.
And I guess a lot of people, when they come to our work, see like this stark contrast of like craft-based practice with new media, and it's like, how do the two function together? And I think even we're still trying to work out ways in which that works together. Yeah. Do we need to share that, or would that already be?
Is it share it?
Yeah, just press play.
Yeah.
Cool. So we're going to kind of move on to like how we kind of like met and how we kind of like practice together and that kind of stuff. So Sahjan and I actually met through an allotment project called Found the Plot, like riffing on losing the plot. And it started in 2020 in lockdown.
Yeah, with Sophia Niazi, who's based in London and Birmingham, and she runs and Rabbit's Road Press. And she's just an amazing person. Like, if you ever get to meet Sophia, like she's just one of these like incredible human beings who coordinates like just projects around her and people around her in a beautiful way.
It was Sophia, Sahjan, me, an artist called Fred Hubble, Larissa Shaw, and Sam Edwards. And the six of us, we got an allotment for like 40 quid. And like, it's ridiculously hard to get an allotment. Like, we're on a waiting list, weren't we? And and then we kind of like decided like what we wanted to grow. It already had like a pear tree there, and it had like different sites. So we plotted like strawberries, broccoli.
Yeah, and quite a lot of salad crops, which didn't work out because the slugs got to them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then in this space, we just had like conversation. So that's kind of what we're going to riff off today. So it became a site for like organizing. It was like a private site because of lockdown and we didn't invite people in, but then we thought, well, what does the intimacy bring in this site?
Yeah.
So we ended up having that show. And then, so the show was like all of us bringing our own practices. So Jan did the tarot reading and read all of our tarots of our future practice. It was a very halal practice.
Yeah.
So, and then we kind of like presented artwork to each other. And then kind of took each other on guided tours of our work in this really cute garden space. And then from then, the conversations just carried on going. We applied for NMG.
Yeah, we have a really interesting process where we like the conversations always seem to take place in these like transient spaces. So when we applied for NMG, we were on a train basically coming back from an NMG meeting, and we were having a dialogue, and it just led to like this idea, like a proposition of like what would like, because that was just post the second lockdown, I think. So we weren't like in India, we weren't coming back from India. We both had this like, kind of lineage and longing and thinking about India. And it kind of, we were thinking about using the NMG kind of collaborative bursary as a way to sort of not only just complexify, but really elasticate this idea of like, what would it mean for that space, which is how so many of our narratives and our sort of conversations to also come into our conversation here, both physically through an exhibition making model and through the publication, but also through these like quite like wondrous, like kind of magical conversations we've been having for like over 14 months now, you know?
Maybe longer.
Yeah.
Could you explain a little bit what NMG is?
Yeah, so
Plug NMG.
Plugging. So NMG, I forget this right now. NMG is like a collaborative network that was started in 2021, riffing off something called the Midland Group that existed in Nottingham. And essentially, they wanted to kind of bring together a group of people to provide workshops, learning, development, as part of like an associate group. And as part of it, we had Chloe, who was the NMG wonderful production assistant. Is that right? Yeah. And then and Colette kind of took over the NMG from another person who wrote the application for it. And so when we both applied, we actually didn't apply together, but we got an email to say that we both got onto the group, and then we were like, oh my God, there's another person from the West Midlands on here.
Yes.
Because it was basically all East Midlands, and I love the East Midlands.
Yeah,
There's
no
just
shade,
so
no
much
shade.
love here. Like I love the West Mids, but now it's all about the East Mids.
I agree with you.
Like I feel like when we came here, we found like a community in itself, and like so when I applied for NMG, I sent in like a voice audio. It's the first time I ever sent in an audio application in my life, because normally it's like filling forms, and I was like, oh my God. So anyway, I answered some of the questions and sent an audio clip, and then found out you got it.
Yeah.
And then as soon as we went for our first NMG meeting, Colette talked about like these bursaries that were available to NMG participants, but also wider networks in the East Midlands and West Midlands, which was really interesting, because you saw this kind of like coming together of these two regions.
Yeah, it was really built around this idea of like the conversations and material and as a production site. So we were, and also throughout the whole like to plug the 18 months, it was really like extraordinary how much confidence it gave you for articulating your ideas, but also articulating the way you want to work with people. I think that's one of the most important things that left with, you know.
I think like for me it was like a place for process over product, and that's something I keep like just reiterating in my practice now. It's like instead of thinking about the end product, the end show, the end goal, it's like constant process, and process is conversation, process is workshopping, process is like going and seeing, doing research, and like so much of like the art world, whatever that is, focuses on this end goal, and it's like NMG gave us this time to like really just be with each other, to connect, to like learn, to have conversations, and I feel like conversation has become like something we've taken away from it and implemented in our practice through publication, through chats, through meetings.
It's one of the most interesting things, because it just seems like because it was organic before we were conscious of it, you know, like and it became one of these things which just was like now it's structured at the very sort of like like it's just part of like an organ system within the work. Like you just use it because, especially thinking about the fact that the way that we put, because the Nangal Pend-ing Dark Village is a series of conversations, and it's this expansive potentiality of the conversation. You know, like it sits there with the fact that there's moments where you stop and pause, which are the process moments where you're actually consciously unaware of where you're going to go next with the conversation. And those are the sort of things, those interjections, those moments of like rendering are kind of what makes out this kind of this duo, like ongoing project, what we do.
Yeah.
Really fascinating because we don't know where we're leading to, but yet we continue with this like this space of possibility, you know?
I feel it's like interesting because loads of people that you talk to will tell you never to like mix work and like pleasure, or work and family, or work and business.
We did the opposite.
You know? We're like, hell no.
Hey mom!
Hey bro. Yeah. Like, Sahjan is like my best friend, but now my family. And I know that that is like not always the case in like collaborating and working relationships. Like, it's like an ideal situation if you get that from somewhere. But like, I feel like the way that we've like analyzed relationships and what we kind of don't want to see in collaboration, like it's a journey. Like we still don't know everything there is to know, and it's not like a perfect utopia where like two artists have like an equal share of artwork. Like the balance skews. There are arguments. There are like ways to kind of like negotiate and things like that. And it's not about like compromise, but it's about how much you care for each other and how much you respect each other. And like care being like the operative word. So like how you hold space like intimately for each other. And like it's about like, we think like collaboration is like equity. So like, you know, there are times when I've done more work, there are times when you've done more work, depending on each other's capacities. But in that kind of like collaborative relationship, because we're always talking to each other, because we're always understanding each other's kind of like life experiences and stuff, then you end up kind of building that trust with each other. But we also saw like Colette and Aisling as collaborators. We saw the site as a collaboration. It's like, how do you treat the site and how is the site treating you? How are the directors of the gallery treating you and how are you treating them? How are the curators treating you and how do you treat them? So it was really important to kind of like highlight the conversations we were having with Colette and Aisling. Like, imagine if more artists thought about collaborating with a curator and more curators thought about collaborating with the artist, as opposed to this kind of like weird hierarchical skewy relationship that often occurs.
Yeah, like the biggest things that I always talk about collaboration is the fact that it's like a form of contamination because you're mutually sort of like engaging your like worlds essentially, and you're trying to sort of figure out like where you sit with each other, and you're negotiating, and you're having all these moments. Because one of the things which I noticed with us is like we were unpacking quite a lot within each other's worlds and lives, which changed the way that the collaboration would evolve. Like we never sort of we never had a predetermined approach to collaboration, but we had these structures in place to ensure that collaboration would be mutualistic. Exactly. It wouldn't be designed around this idea of like one person's more expropriative, the other person's doing more administration. We had this I don't know, like it felt very organic, but there were these very clear frameworks of operation which were happening throughout the like 14 months.
I think the biggest framework was the constant conversation,
absolutely,
dialogue,
like I think
and discourse.
It's if checking in, like literally in the most basic sense, like checking in and understanding the fact that there's certain forms of articulation that you need to be able to do, so that the other person can understand you. Because there were moments when there were like, we had to deal with difficulty throughout the process. And we were very clear about making sure that those moments we were both being heard and listened to and sharing the workload and sharing the informations around the kind of the network of people we were organizing around.
And then like collaborating with Colette and Aisling, I always think about this, but Aisling taught me that the word curator comes from the Latin word cura, which means to care for. So like that was something that we held on to, and it's really interesting looking at like Colette and Aisling's practice and how they held space and facilitated our relationship, because there were like times of like tension points where like it was coming up to the end of the show and we were like trying to figure out like how we were going to get everything ready and stuff, and they were just kind of like there and on hand to kind of like remove those kind of like pressure points almost, to allow things to kind of continue organically. Yeah,
absolutely. I guess one of the interesting things is the fact that when you said held space, they literally had an architecture around them to ensure that we could go in if we needed the time and space to think through a problem, share a concern, create a dialogue, maybe even completely reimagine what we were working on and thinking about. And the conversations, the book, which I'm plugging, please buy, they show you kind of how this process was evolving and unfolding, because it's not, some of these things are quite ineffable to talk about because they're very like, they're not side or like kind of underneath you, but they're just around you at all times, and you trying to find a way of articulating them is very difficult, especially when you're thinking about like up to four people coming into the same room, trying to like bring this body into existence of a publication exhibition and this dialogue, this conversation. But these things have like, it just felt like that we were contaminating each other, we were like infecting worlds, you know?
Yeah.
And just using that as a model, I think is a really like an interesting strategy, as opposed to trying to be like, Roo has one side, Sahjan has another. It felt very like intermingled, even if it looks like that. There were so many mixed conversations, so many references within the work.
The work spoke to each other, so that was also another continued dialogue and another continued conversation. Like I was really thinking about like a material present, and you were thinking about like an ephemeral future, and we're both thinking about Punjab and our families. And so like, you know, you generously work with your family. I don't have family, so I generously try to create family in my spaces through my audiences and try to bring those together. And I guess like we kind of riff off ideas of like a queer chosen family and how you kind of like remove areas of like who's the mother, who's the father, brothers, sisters, like we're all like this big generative kind of like force of siblings and comrades. And comrades is like a really great word to describe it, because
its etymology is very interesting. It also comes from French, which means to be in the room with somebody else, which is what this really was, which was to be in the room with another person, another body, another species, because that's one of the ways that we were seeing it.
Manifesting our ancestors there, manifesting like, for me, I was like bringing like different gods and spirits into the space and like bringing audiences through the furniture.
It felt very like, not haunting is the wrong word, but it felt like there were more volumes within the space than just our bodies. And it was very emotional, because we on the opening night, like I was crying.
Drama.
I was in the hotel crying. I came downstairs, I was crying. I had a haircut. I used to have really long hair, and I shaved it off. And then in Supercuts, they were like, "What's wrong? Are you okay?" And I was like, "It's fine. I just want to have like a new haircut."
I think we should act private views. Just saying.
We try to. That's another conversation we're having. Like, what's alternative models? Because those moments are very like this moment here, which is very nerve-wracking for me, because I'm like. That's why I'm not looking directly at everyone, but I'm just like, it's like sometimes these things actually ask of us things which we have to stretch ourselves into, and that's what it did, because that's why we were crying so much, I think, that day. But it felt good, it was cathartic. It was
like the pressure of like the funding bodies and large speeches and things like that, and it's just like, this space couldn't be quantified in a 5-minute speech. And this is why I think things like the book are so important, because it continues that conversation, but it's like, it's all the conversations we had around the show, but then it's like potential conversations going forward. And I think this is really important, like to make sure, like, I don't know, like be DIY, like we made that ourselves, like through like money that we'd got through different strands of funding through Arts Council and various different bits. And it seemed like if people went into the show, it would seem as though it was like an Arts Council, Art Corps, NMG funded show, which it was predominantly, but then equally there was so much other DIY organising that went on. And like when you're like facing adversity, especially in the arts, like you have no other choice but to be resourceful and to like find different systems of organising and, you know, plucking on your friend networks and pulling things together and trying to organise against, it's kind of like trying to organise against institutional systems and like prove that, you know, you can do things grassroots yourself.
Absolutely. One of the things I always I met with the director of a gallery, and he asked me the model I operate with institutions, and I always, people don't like when I say this, but I'm very open about it. It's like I'm quite parasitic, and I really enjoy that approach to things, because a parasite changes the conditions of its host, and I'm always interested in this, like the idea like the space was hosting us, you know, and then we're also hosting narratives, and especially like these complex lineages. And I'm hosting my family in the work as well, so I'm always conscious of the fact that multiple things are being collapsed into this space. And referring back to what you're talking about, this idea of like when we were coming in a pragmatic sense to economically just like make this show possible, we had these incredible like funding opportunities, like possibilities, because we were just having dialogues going, well, we just have to go for that and figure out what that looks like, you know, and we have to just go for this thing and figure out what this looks like and see how that fits in. And it felt very like it just felt very we had a very holistic understanding of like how we would build this thing. We didn't come in at it with a sense like it's going to be a very linear, progressive thing. We came at it quite jaggedy, which I'm very I respect personally. My videos are jaggedy, and there's this thing which is like they are broken, they change shape, and that's how we kind of approached even talking and dealing with each other, because we know that things are gonna alter when you enter these opportunities and things,
And it's about being generous. So whilst taking rest and taking time out for yourself, thinking about spaces where you can give back. So we worked with the university and we did artist talks with them, and then we did crit sessions and then a workshop. So that was all free labor, but then in return they helped us paint the space. So it's just ways of organizing with community, with different people and bodies and organizing, but making sure that you're able to kind of create a circular economy through that, bypassing the whole institution and just pulling people together, but then giving back to those people. And that is the nature of a lot of community and grassroots organizing. That is how we, get stuff done, really.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point to stress, is the fact that we were organizing quite a lot of people around just the physical exhibition. There were also a series of 3 events, public events, which happened, and one of them was a kind of a walkthrough and exhibition, making talk with a group of which ARCO organized, and I attended and talked them through the processes of making this thing. We were really conscious of the fact that we wanted it to be a gift of space, so that more people can just enter into it. And what you sort of think is really interesting is the fact that we offered a structure to the university so that they could come and see a progression of from the first moment we're painting walls all the way to actually a curatorial visit. They could see how an exhibition gets made and thought through, especially with freelance practicing artists.
And then giving them top tips and little hacks. Hot tips.
Yeah.
And little hacks how we experience art. So when they're painting, they're not just painting, we're constantly chatting with them, talking to them. I keep in touch with a couple of them via email even now, and when I have capacity, I'm not going to outstretch myself, but equally I'm just, I'm still keeping ties, because the thing is the world works in a circular way, and you never know when you're going to see these people again. And in my culture, I was always told to treat people with respect, and so you kind of see those ethos and stuff that have been passed down to you from your family, just projecting out it back into spaces again.
Yeah, a core principle we worked on without being too conscious of it was just relationship building as praxis, just going that encounters with both, human and other species life can alter you, and you can alter it, and these things will have lifelong effects for you. And I think that's one of the most important things that I'm taking forward with whatever I work with now, is the fact that you can actually really shape, shift, and change someone's life through sometimes even small encounters. And that's when we think back on our relationship and praxis, duo praxis here, it came through from almost an accidental moment, and then it just evolved. And it's something which I'm really interested in, because that's how I see life happening, really. It's just these moments which suddenly boil over and become life. So yes, it's been an incredible journey.
Yeah.
Put out there.
Yeah, let's open up now.
Or just a conversation, maybe
questions, conversation.
So we've got one that's just come through on the Zoom, and then we can kind of conversation. But please raise your hand if you want to to say anything, just so that everyone on the Zoom can hear as well. Thank you so much for that, Roo and Sahjan. That was a really interesting overview there of your kind of individual and collaborative practices, collaborative in terms of the way you collaborate together and with other people, objects, spaces. Just got a thought here from Jane on the chat. Hi, I love the work, but what I love and respect more is the warmth and depth of your working and personal relationship. Do you feel that the show has made you become more or less selective of where you go next? I wonder whether the relationship and collaboration is more important than the next exhibition piece.
Absolutely, relationship is everything. We have Zoom chats, so yesterday we were on the call for 2 hours, just whittling away at all things. And we keep having these moments, when we're traveling on trains together, it's So we applied for this bursary on a train together. We did one video where it was like me and Sahjan and our faces, one video where it was facing some empty seats, and another video of like out of the window, and answered 3 of the research questions to apply for the bursary. And it's just been this continuous thing. The relationship is like key to everything. All of our conversations generate ideas, and we don't think about the institution at all. So we're in a place called Black Hole Club together at Vivid Projects, and we've not thought about doing another show there. We're just like, oh, like let's talk about food. So we talk about food together, and they're like, let's make a zine about recipes. Yeah, let's make a zine about recipes. And it's just generative, and it just sort of like happens, and that the conversations lead to more stuff rather than more shows, just more ideas.
I'm a solo artist. I don't care about anybody else.
Come on, please.
I always use the metaphor. I've used this metaphor with friends before. I'm like, sometimes the solo. I get into trouble. I always get in trouble. But like sometimes it's like a fighter pilot versus like what we do, which is like a cabin crew, like a commercial jet, and there's like 500 people on board. But I think one like I guess what I'm getting to is the fact that I'm not particularly interested in like finalizing an exhibition from what we do. I'm vastly more interested in the fact that there's this like weird dialogue and dialectic which happens between us, which is not necessarily, which cannot be compounded or like built into like an institutional framework, because it's just taking place in these non-institutional spaces, because like a train journey, like these or wherever we find ourselves.
When we go to eat together.
Yeah, when we go to like Damascena, plug Damascena right now. But it just seems like there's something really profound about the fact that we came together not really knowing how we were going to work together, and then it just led to these like ongoing things which I find far more interesting than like I'm going to have another like exhibition with you, and that's the only model I'm interested in working with you, because the reason like we did have we had a duo exhibition, but this was really like adamantly a conversation between our practices, because that's the only way we wanted to manifest like the space together, so we could figure out like actually what are we really thinking about, what we're talking about when we're talking about these things all the time.
We thought about what it was like to have 2 individuals and a collective, like well, where does the individual voice go in a collective model, because you see like this collective thing's becoming like a big discourse, and we're like, how do you honor each person? How do you allow each person to have a voice while sharing like a dialogue? Because it's really important to have like intersectionality. Like we don't want to become the same thing. We're not the same thing. We're very different. Our life experiences are different. Our journeys are different. But we always make space to come together to talk about like we said, similarity, opposition, difference.
One of the things that's really interesting from this show, which happened specifically after it's changed me, is the fact that it became like this thing which is like a forest got cropped almost, and like all these like different fungi started evolving around it, and that's sort of now how I'm beginning to see our relationship more so. Like this, we built this architecture together, which was the exhibition and the book, and now that's kind of like moved into the past framework, and now this thing, this like mycelium has kind of like just become a ambient in the space, and that's how I'm seeing how we're going to start talking now, because we're kind of taking it into like a much more spectral space, because with the recipe conversations that we're having and everything, they're much more divergent and kind of burrowing than this original model, which was way more sort of like tree-like we were growing upwards. This is way more like, let's go into the interior of structures. Let's figure out like how like dal and sabji and like bhujis are made together, you know, like, and alongside that, like thinking about because it's really hard to articulate, but the village in India, which we're foregrounding so hard as the sort of thing which we've inherited as a model of collaboration, is the fact that it's the site where people congregate together and have like really...
the village brought us up.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's the space which is expansive, like dialogue, and it's an oral space where people have conversations and encounter each other all the time, encounter different life forms. And that's kind of the thing which has been brought over here. Now we're giving it a literal body to sort of keep on going. And that's why one of the reasons we don't necessarily to answer the question in a very long-winded way, it was almost like being on a roller coaster, but is the fact that we don't seek out exhibition making as a proposition, it just ends up sometimes as a byproduct, but really we're more interested in this like, this friendship, you know, and this relationship, you know.
Half the time we don't talk about art, we just bitch about people.
Yeah, I don't know, art, whatever, you know.
Shade, so much shade.
Yeah, I think it's also the fact that we have, I think I began realizing, and something I've become very comfortable with now in my life, is actually have quite a negative affirmation of art. Like I don't really see it as a thing which changes like internal to me. Like it is some type form of therapy for me. Like and it really, if I, like it helps me express some of my problems in the world. But it's also this thing which really creates a latent commons with people, and that's what I'm really interested, especially with Roo. Is like we create a latent commons together, and it has this this pool, this oceanic pool of potential, and that's what we're really interested in. So that answers that question, I think. Sorry about that. Sorry about it.
Great, thank you. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Janvi. I'm from India.
I'm so glad you came, Janvi.
I've not been home in some time, and this was nice. I just wanted to say that seeing the practice, they're so different and so individualistic, but they do complement each other so much, because I see both works, both artists sort of working towards a utopia of some kind, of wanting to belong to, say, a socially equal space. Is it Sangat or is it non-hierarchical Sangat? Is it Aram or is it rest in a place where people ask you to work? Or, those kind of things very much come across. Let's go to the moon, let's create our own community. And it connects and it really complements. And
Can you write that down on a piece of paper and send it me later? Yeah, that's really nice. Thank you. I think it's like the utopia thing, like all of these kind of suggestions we're having, they become like neoliberal, like they kind of like become these like really big ideas of like, how do you put community into an institution? Is it possible? I think that answers are like really complex and there isn't a straightforward answer. It's like the institution will always be the institution. And like, I really believe in like a bottom-up strategy. So like the community comes in, they bring in their own stuff and they leave. Thanks for providing the space. Do you know what I mean? Rather than the institution being like, we want the community to come in and perform for us while we take our photos and tick our boxes and happily get our funding streams. Yeah. You can go out now, community. And it's like, when does this thing stop becoming a trend? When does this thing stop becoming a phase? And it's like, if that's what the institution's going to do, then how do we go in and get what we want? And how do we go in and, work out what we want to take from that space and then take away into our own spaces? How do we give back to our communities? But equally, it's like, how can we just exist without them, full stop? So like, the book and stuff like that, like, this is our own way of like making the dollar and feeding it back into the practice. And feeding it back into the practice and just like working out our own ways of like making money and having that economy generating without a big body of funding and stuff.
To sort of like just add on to that, it's like the interesting thing is the condition. When we talk about the community within the institution, it's like the main working antagonism there is the way that the community is being hosted, which is like usually quite like you said, the top parasitizes off the bottom, and it's like really intriguing that these things, these relationships are temporal. They just get built in for like a specific amount of time. Like you'll be here for 2 months doing this like program, and then we're gonna like we've only got that much money, and that's it then. Whereas like one of the things that we really wanted to, like as a testament to the fact that we've been working together for so long is going, just because this has ended doesn't mean we end. Like we've been fundamentally changed by each other, and that's going to change other things in our lives. And it's trying to like reframe kind of these like, and literally almost at the same time, not just reframe, but actually fundamentally materially change the conditions of working for other things.
And just because that's ended, we don't end, but neither do we. Like, the relationship we have with Colette, the relationship we have with Primary, like...
Shout out Primary.
This is one thing that I love about the Primary program as well, like it's got like that cyclical nature of like thinking about like nourishing others and how you kind of like feed back into different structures and do things that have longevity, not just like a 3-month show.
Also, the thing you were saying about like futures is the fact that's really beautiful to hear, because both of the thing that we wanted this space to sort of be tethered to is the fact that both of us were thinking about different worlds we could go to, and also the possibilities of going to those worlds, and actually the material ways to get to those worlds is through these like conversations. So there were so many different cracks and crevices that people could crawl into within, and hopefully these photos don't really give context, but because it was a very sensuous material world we built. But it was a space you could go somewhere else and figure out what that elseness is, or that otherness, other worldness is. which is why I think that it was just really magical. I'm just thinking back to going, actually, like it was amazing, because it wasn't a culmination. It was like this, it was a comma within the sentence we're building together, if that makes sense.
More questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. I was
Just
talking.
got to be near you this time, yeah.
I wanted to ask you something about the village, and I think some of it comes across in some of your way of thinking. Because I was born here, but my parents come from a village, so there's a way of thinking which is embedded in how you were brought up, I think. But the question, the issues you raise, I think, is only become problematic if you think like the funders, in a way. Because if you think of this as a 150-year-old story of an artist from India or the East talking to the West, it's a long conversation.
Yeah, massive.
And then, you get little glimpses of it in this 100-year debate about postmodernism and modernism, in the discussion between Tagore and the West, or Keats and Keats and England, in a way. And I think it's that discussion. If you look at Indian artists like Amrita Shah, who were brought up in the West and went to India, what they think about compared to what Tagore's thinking about and what that's due to that history, it's part of a longer story of us. And some of the things that we've thought about of that period of time have been incorporated into Western art history slowly, or beginning to, and twisted around, and then thrown back at you, and you have to then think about how do you engage with this, now that it's been thrown back at you on their terms.
Yeah.
But it's part of this thing about you trying to define yourself always through the lens of the West. And I think it's that longest history of what you're doing as part of art history that's coming across that's quite interesting, I think.
Yeah, I think so for me personally, like I was born here, but then I was taken to Punjab by my family and like left there until I was about 5. So really my like diasporic relationship, like Punjabi was my first language. Like I was running around a farm barefoot with cows and stuff, and then like came over here and then went into schooling. So like you can't like define like so many people in the West be like, oh, you're from India, I've been to Goa, and it's like, good for you, that's not where I'm from, but okay. And it's like, from village to village our stories don't even match up. From like one migration journey to another migration journey, there is so much difference. And it's like in that like big plethora of like 100 years of conversations and stuff, every single story is unique. But then the West are like pigeonholing it into this big bracket. So we're almost trying to like defy different stories as well through different materials. But you're right, we went to art school. We have that privilege, we have that language, we know how to philosophize. So you write these big bios and art statements and things like that, and you end up recycling that language. And like it's really interesting actually, because we had a workshop through NMG and it was about like artist statement writing. So we wrote some dark statements, and dark statements are like for like your best mate or like your auntie down the road. Like how do you explain your arts practice to them and have like an insider audience or a different relationship with them without having to like recycle Western languages or art frameworks like you would do on like an art bio. And it was really interesting, some of the conversations we had and like the way that we would like explain that practice to someone else. And it just like that workshop was really great because it made me think like, why am I writing such in an institutional way? Why am I using frames of reference and terminology from the West? Why don't I just abandon it and write it the way that I understand it? So like now, like after that workshop, I wrote in my bio in like first person, and I put in Punjabi words, and I'm not worried if people don't understand them. Go Google it, email me, ask me what it is. Do you know what I mean? I don't change my accent and don't change the words I'm using. And I learned that from you and from Colette and from that workshop. And it's just like constantly unlearning all these things, because it's not my fault I grew up here. It's not my fault that I, like defined myself as British, Asian or whatever. Like that is like the societal conditioning. But it's about constantly unlearning that language and unlearning those kind of categories and stuff.
Yeah, I guess in that I'm really interested in the proposition of inheritance in all this as well, like because we get given things which augment like our behaviors and our social structures as we gather them, like and forage them from others, So I guess when I was thinking about like India, I always think I try to elasticate space-time a bit, and stretch it so that like these things are like defying some of the gravitational renderings of like the Western canon, you know, like air quotes then.
How are you avant-garde?
Well, it's like thing. It's also like I'm not like it's just fascinating to me because the what's a meta commentary within my work is this idea that and especially with the dialogue that we're having is like it's really fascinating that like you get you are physically rendered as an artist or have an artistic pursuit by an institutional language, and then that gets made visible and like. That gets read in a specific economy and circulation, and then at the same time, I'm there like, well, actually, my body's doing that at the same time as well. Like within the work, it's actually like faux rendering itself, and it's kind of this weird. Again, this like these two dialogues force themselves into one another. Like, oh, what is this? How are you articulative to our institutional language? And at the same time, how is your body? Like, can it physically fit into our institutional language? And these things it was fascinating when we were doing the dark statement thing because it was the release of that almost, wasn't it? It was the antithesis. It was like, I'm actually, I personally believe everyone should have the capacity to say no to something. Like, I have a small bit of like refusal, and that's kind of what some of the stuff is really like doing within us, especially the dark statement, and kind of like, even I would actually potentially theorize our relationship as some form of refusal, you know, an antagonism against the way that we work with others, which is productive, I think, which is not like an unproductive like, it's more like. I don't know, it's like a Real Housewives reunion. It's like, I'm coming here, I'm shading this person, you know.
It's like constantly being in flux. Yeah. Like Stuart Hall says that identity is this constant process of always never fully becoming. So when you like think about that sentence, it's just like, I'm not who I was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So how can I be put into some sort of like category? My practice doesn't look like what it did 5 years ago. Yeah. And that kind of thing. So just constantly evolving and changing.
Yeah, because it's trying to get as far away from where, in one theory of what you could ask for this is like, it's getting as far away from where we were to figure out what potential we could get to.
Just always learning, always educating yourself, educating those around you, just like knowing that no position is fixed and knowing that you're able to make mistakes as well, like doing with humility. Like a big part of Sikhi is about having humility and knowing that you can make a mistake, but then thinking about how you come back from that as well.
Yeah.
Thank you. I've just got one more question on the chat and then we're going to go over to Jade. So from the chat, and thank you for that, Jagdesh. Relationship building as praxis and using terms of equity within working relationships. I love it. How do you translate your ideas as an artist to your families, elders and communities? Have there been any challenges in explaining the transformative power and possibility in art practice, especially since the art world can sometimes feel so hostile to these communities?
Yeah.
For me, it's been a different relationship. Like, I don't have family, so I'm trying to cultivate family through my practice. So, like, thinking about the Munji as structures, like, they were things that I grew up on in Punjab. Like, I remember, like, my family gathering around it, like, eating on it, sleeping on it, like, having rows on it, deciding really important decisions back in the village on it. Like, so through my practice, I'm trying to, like, cultivate a sense of family. So I have a very different relationship, obviously, because I'm not having to try and, like, describe what my work is or go back to my family and try and explain what it is that I do in life. Like, I feel privileged in that sense, but equally I have a really great sense of loss as well. So, yeah, it's kind of different in that sense, but I feel like maybe I can relate it to the time I worked at Lidl. So I worked at Lidl, Soho Road, Handsworth.
I know that store. You know.
It's the best store. And like the staff there, they were like me, like we spoke Punjabi, like we had like big chats together. And I remember when I made a manji like for the first time, and I showed like one of the staff members, and they were like, for me it was easy to translate like the object, because they were like, wow, you made a manji all by yourself. Like that is like ancient indigenous practice being passed down from one hand to another. How did you learn it? Did your mom and dad teach you? And I'm like, no, I learned on YouTube. And then this uncle is like dead proud of me, and he's like, Beta, you've done a great job. Like it's like really cute and really gorgeous. And like then I'm like, okay, that's how I can receive that like sense of pride. Like I can imagine my dad would be like dead proud of me, and you know, get that feeling from there. So like you know, I make for my community, so I don't feel like my work that I make I have to translate back to my community, like because it's something they already recognize and see. And so there's that easy kind of like connection and affiliation. Like I'm looking at my Dhissou people right now, and when I've brought up like some of my things, I'm speaking in Punjabi and like different words, like there's that nod, and you know, you do it for that. It's like when you walk down a road and it's quiet in like a, I don't know, like a white area, and you see someone who's like from the same culture as you just nod, and there's this instant just like recognition of, yeah, you know, we know each other, you're out from our community, and that's the kind of thing that I feel like goes on in my practice. So there's a real insider audience. I guess that's what I'd say. But you actually work with your family, so like...
Yeah, it's really funny because I think that my family are like hyper, like I think a lot of people like who, I like that my family, especially my mom, like they're just hyper imaginative people, and they've, like I was just thinking like the things she's done to keep me alive, like bureaucratically, like through the state just to keep my body here. All these acts of like fictionalizing things to keep like me here and keep me alive are creative acts, and acts of like resistance against like ways of being rendered, which is like a big thing in my work. But like when I work with my family, like I don't know, they're far more creative than I am, and I think it's interesting because like this whole idea that that because they don't have I don't even like to talk, but contemporary art education means that they can't enter into the work. Actually, I feel like they're the people who make the work more like available in many ways. And it's interesting because the way I worked, I didn't actually tell them it was an art project. I said that, oh, I want to go to the moon with you guys, and that's what I said. I didn't even approach it as an artwork. I was genuinely, when I was doing it, and you kind of were witness to this.
I always love what you say. You say, my mom is the artist and I'm the collaborator.
Yeah, like I'm the kind of vessel which channels some of the like dialogue. And because she's just this incredible, like she's one of the most incredible human beings on like this planet, because she like came by herself, and she's raised me and my sisters, and all these things to augment and make sure life is possible for us. And it just made me think a lot about the fact that they're the first architects of relationship building for me. So I have to sort of, as just a person who witnesses that, especially through like I guess a feminist lens, you sort of want to sort of ensure that there's so much mutualistic respect given that they get to build a world with me, because that's what's actually happened with this, is that it's like it's hard because your name gets put onto all this because you kind of, it's just the way the framework of it is, but they're actually more interesting than I am, and I really kind of celebrate that. Like I'm not interesting. I am, but like what else, you know? You'll see it if you meet me, you know? But like in terms of family, but like being invited into this space and how they work is the fact that they have the potential to do far more than I do as an individual, because we can come together in that space. And you won't be able to hear it or see it, but we had and you listen to this, and Colette and everyone listened to this about the exhibition, is like we were actually having an hour-and-a-half conversation about going to the moon together, and we were just talking a bit on one of the screens with the moon playing over it, and we're just talking a lot about spectral sites and sites of like possibility, like who gets to own the moon, you know, like, and what does land look like now? Is this being like, because the history of like colonization is also like terraforming, which is a science fiction idea of like making land hospitable for life. And these are the questions that we're asking of each other, and they might not come from at it from like a visual aesthetic standpoint of 21st century contemporary art, professional, financial making world, but they come at it with a far more creative like possibility. And I'm not trying to fold them into this contemporary financial art making world, but I'm just trying to figure out like what would their interjection as a glitch or some sort of form be in the space for us. As we can listen to it, like part of the conversation was actually playing this well, which had a surface and transductive speaker built into it. So there's all these like complex ways that they would be echoing within the space. So I see them as people, like, yeah, I really like what you just reminded me. Is like my mom is like the artist, and I'm the code almost for her. But she's just so cool. Maybe you'll meet her. You know, but yeah, that was.
I mean, I still haven't met her, so like, you know.
Oh my God, I haven't introduced you yet.
No.
Okay, we'll come up with that. You know. What was the next question?
Great. Jade's just vanished, so we've got a bit of a gap. We've got 5 minutes left, so has anyone else got anything they want to share? Chloe? Yeah, let me come towards you.
I was thinking about how much I love in the show Riverlights the like expansive use of materials, and how like interesting all of them working together is. And also how there's like different binaries of each of your practice that are like community art, contemporary art, and craft, and how these are often like really strictly looked down upon by the other, or like viewed by different binaries that, you know, people set themselves in. and how there seems to be like a seamless dialogue between these things in the show, and both of your work. And I just wondered whether that's like something you've considered or thought about or talked about at all. Yeah.
I think it's kind of like something that was intuitive. So like you see like the craft, like, you know, the kind of ornately made munchies. You see like this like really beautiful use of like materiality and technology, and like contemporary art and like community art, all kind of sharing space. But that's all the stuff that we do. So really all you see is two individuals sharing space. When two individuals get on and their work gets on too, I guess. And I guess that is how plainly or clearly I'd like to see it. And I don't think there is some kind of like articulate, arty answer or some like really big academic explanation. I think you can tell that these two artists who are working together get on, and that's what you see when you see in the space. So when the materials are marrying, when the practices are marrying, when these ideas are marrying, it's because you can see the care and stuff. And like I've been to things before where like I've seen a show and you see like one artwork competing for another. Like we both had video works in this, but we've both considered whose practice needs the sound element, whose practice might take more like a muted approach. And that's what we spoke about like earlier with like equity and space sharing and that kind of like negotiation and conversation. And like when you know that two artists get on, you can see it visibly. But like I remember going to this one show in Coventry, and there was like a really big like symphony opera thing going on Ice Cap.
You're live, by the way.
I don't care. And then in the other room, there was this really important debate going on about like blackness and indigenous culture. And it's like the two works were competing for space. And it's really frustrating to see that because it's an injustice to both of the artists. It's an injustice to their like potential relationship. And it's like, how could you like put that in the same space? And I think that's because the artists weren't part of that show and curating it. It's because a curator came along and put that work together in that space, or the institution set it out like that. It's really about understanding the room. Like, you know, when you have family over for dinner, you think about who's going to sit next to who and how they commute around that table, or you like organically organize around the table and it just kind of flows. And I think when people get on, you can tell by the work.
Like one of the things I realized early on with this is that we both have different engines of making, and that's kind of something we celebrated, like the fact that we wanted to have this quite like, we just, like mutually celebrating the fact that we have difference, you know, and then ensuring that difference is actually like part of the process of making. And I really think that that's one of the ways that we foregrounded coming together throughout this process.
Individual and the collective.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. But I think this idea of like holding space for the others, like it's not only sonic intervention, but like in a material sense, like making sure that there was like just like not an equal, but like a respectable amount of like togetherness at the same time, which held this like thing together, as opposed to just making it sure it was just too. It never. I don't know if you've ever experienced this. It never felt too separate. It felt like there was a tetherless.
Like, you could see who's who because of the green and blue walls.
Conscious choice.
But like in that who's who, there's always the conversation, and it is a group show, and that is constantly being held by like the objects in the room and how they reflect and talk to each other. But like thinking about like a dinner table setting, if like one voice was louder, then the other wouldn't be heard, and if like they clashed into each other, then there'd be a completely new voice. And that's something that we might explore at some point through collaboration, like the joining of the voices and what new baby that creates. We're not having babies. That terminology. That terminology. Sorry. Just like that was like, whoa. But like, you know, like this thing that we create together, that might be something completely different. I guess you kind of see it in the book a little bit, like where we cross over. But like, I don't think that collaboration is necessarily like me, I don't know, let's say like being some spiritual god and it glitches into your video. It doesn't need to be that literal. And I think a lot of collaborators are like, I do this and you do this and let's add them together and this equals this.
Yeah, like an equation-based process, as opposed to just like this
coming together
dialectic process, like just talking. You know, like
there's like this really beautiful place in Denmark that I constantly refer to. I think it's called Skane. And it's where the North Sea and the Baltic Sea mix together because of one sea, the current travels like west and the other current travels in a different direction. And I think it's the only place in the world where the current travels in different directions. So you get these two individual seas that come together, mix, clash every now and again, but they're never one thing. They're two different seas, but because of the currents, it's really beautiful. And I think that's a good relationship or a good etymology for like, whether that's like a romantic relationship, kinship, like brother, sister, family, friendship, collaborative partnership, coming together, never becoming the same thing, never becoming codependent, but existing as two individuals within a collaborative conversation.
Yeah.
That was a beautiful analogy. Thank you. We're at time. Jade, did you still want to ask a question? Or you? Yeah. So we'll just finish on Jade and then we'll draw it to a close.
I was just going to say about there being multiple authenticities and the importance of that. What authentic feels for different people is different, and I think what you're saying about how you speak, how you present yourself, how you frame your work, how you frame your practice, what your journey is, what your ancestors' journey is, and that's a very individual authenticity, and you can find those synergies between other people's authenticities, but it's about honouring those things. And I think it's important, from my perspective, from what you're kind of talking about, is that it's a very complicated thing, what authenticity is. Some people don't even know what is authentic to them. And I think it's very important to just let people self-define what that is, and in that process making sure they have as much time as they need, and that for some people is a lifetime. And a lot of people talk about practice as something that's very kind of time related, but actually it's like an ongoing process of some people that never stops. There's no kind of beginning or end of that, And I get the sense of, like you're saying about circular economies and generally kind of working through kind of conversations and relationships and research, those things are consistently growing and building. And there's no real like part that feels like final or finalized or kind of resolved, or, it's consistently always messy and a bit uncertain and fragmented and all those things. And I do get a feel of that kind of search in your work, both of you, for what feels right for you. Like I always say, what does it mean for an artist to feel at peace? And by at peace, I don't just mean things that are kind of peaceful, but actually how can you sit with yourself and sit with your consciousness? How can you sit with, am I okay with that? Do I feel good about that? Like, I think that for me comes in your work, like that integrity for yourselves of like, this is how I work. Do I feel okay with that? Do I feel like that sits with me well? Can I sit with that? And if I can't sit with that, what do I do about that? It seems like that kind of urge to not ignore what your body is saying comes across in your work. And that was more of a statement, so not really a question, but more of a reflection on your conversation.
Yeah, thank you. Just kind of like riffing off that, I guess a lot of it is complexity, and it's like staying with the complexity and the messiness and keeping asking questions and keeping interrogating that messiness. And like you said, nothing's resolved, like everything's a conversation. And it's complicated, and we keep having these dialogues and keep critiquing things and realizing that everything is messy. But I think being at peace is when you can accept that it's messy and accept that there's no concrete, simple answer, and it's just a lifetime of processing.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I'm very conscious of the fact that like when you like work with like the kind of like the concepts and relationships that we work with, that you have to be open to the fact that things will be dismantled and things will be changed, and you'll have to be changed in the process, and also then you're going to have to also change others, and those things kind of require you to come to some type of acceptance with the fact that, like, I love that word, like you're going to have to accept messiness, because it's like it's that things when we try and frame things within an institutional framework, we're trying to like hygienify them, but this sort of stuff is just like it's hard, because it's so, like we said, the village is 2.5 hours away from each other. There's like a whole gulf of different relationships in that space. There's a whole gulf of different histories and lineages in that space. And we're like, one of the things I guess I'm also very conscious in thinking about is the fact that I'm trying to defy a lot of these like these expectations of like a totalization, more so that there's going to be this ongoing development and transformation process which leads you on to different discoveries, and then those are the things which I'm far more interested in than having like a complete rendering of myself or a complete rendering of us. Like we're kind of like, I haven't mentioned the black hole yet, whoa, but like we're like, one of the reasons I talk about black holes is the fact that they're not visible, but they drag things into them and they augment things around them, and they're constantly like this mutualistic site which takes things to other worlds. And I was thinking about one of our beautiful metaphors for our relationship is the fact that we're like a binary black hole system which is just like orbiting around each other, trying to like figure out what the debris of what like sits around us at all times, because these are half-finished stories sometimes. Like my mom, there's so much violence that she won't talk about, you know, and there's things and within the family, within familial structures and like lineages which fall down. There's a really beautiful story she told me recently about my granddad missing the British Airways flight from Kuwait, which was bombed. Like he was literally about to board that, and then he just got taken off, again for security reasons, which I think is really interesting. But there was all these things which collapsed in, and you have to kind of think, well, actually this thing is so wide and varied as a material substance. It is primordial goo, basically. And it's the origins of some form of life, of thinking, you know. And that's why I sort of come at it with a process.
It's a really big privilege to constantly be able to philosophize so much of our struggles and trauma. So it's like, how do you do justice to that?
Great. Thank you so much. We'll end it on primordial goo. And
I've always wanted that.
Applause to Roo, Sahjan, and the audience today. Thank you for your contributions and insights and energy.
Yeah, thanks for being so generous.
Just to say, yeah, books are at the front with Roo and Sahjan. Go say hi, take a look, purchase one. Feel free to take a Twix or a bag of knickknacks to the road if you're here in person. And please do take some time, if you can, to fill out our audience feedback survey. It'd be greatly appreciated. And thank you again to Jim and Tom. Thank you. Bye.
Watch this. Boom.